I was angry about that. It's like, you're coming after us without seeing we're the only game to fucking give these dead people respect. And you're attacking us for it. And it actually made me personally feel angry at their ignorance.
Startling illustration of just how blatant newspaper lying could be. We all know on some abstract level that newspapers lie, but something like that is a real eye-opener.
It is a sick, disgusting video game. If we lost all common sense, of course it affects our children.
In the beginning, there was an explosion that filled an impossible void. And then there were planets that defined something from the nothingness. Then came life. First minute, then large and cumbersome, and then man. And man had to learn to survive, to make fire, to find purpose in existence itself. And once all that was sorted out, man learned to get annoyed about stuff. So this is a podcast about some controversies. Not the big political controversies, not corporate espionage or fraud. No, none of that. Controversies you may not even have known happened, or how weird they were. So join Andy Smith on a 5-part miniseries delving into little controversies in different aspects of our media. In this episode, we look at a computer game that told us war has never been so much fun. When you think of controversy in video games, you might well think of Doom, with its graphic violence and satanic imagery. It's the game that was said to be a favourite of school shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, who committed the Columbine High School massacre on April the 20th, 1999. Although untrue, word spread that the shooters had prepared for their attack by designing their own Doom levels based on their school. Or you might think of the Grand Theft Auto series, where you rob and kill your way through criminals, police officers, or just ordinary citizens, before occasionally stopping off to relax with a prostitute.
It's better if we find somewhere private, baby.
Controversy around video games is nothing new. Way back in 1976, arcade game Death Race became the focus of outcry due to its gameplay. The player has to drive their car over stick figure-like gremlins, who, because they're stick figures, are as good as human. The noise they make when they're run over didn't help. Quoted from an interview in the New York Times in 1976, Gerald Dreisen, a behavioural psychologist and manager of the National Safety Council's research department, voiced here by an actor, said,
On TV, violence is passive. In this game, a player takes a first step to creating the violence. The player is no longer just a spectator. He's an actor in the process. I'm sure most people playing this game do not jump in the car and drive at pedestrians, but 1 in 1,000? 1 in 1,000,000? And I shudder to think what will come next if this is encouraged. It'll be pretty gory.
Daily Oregonian, July 3rd, 1976. Extracts from the article, most find it humorous. New game, Chase Pedestrians, by Wendy Walker. Seattle, AP. The latest computerised game at the local bar or pool room is called Death Race. For 25 cents, you can pretend you're running down pedestrians with a car. If people get a kick out of running down pedestrians, you have to let them do it, said Paul Jacobs, Director of Marketing for Exidy, the Palo Alto company that designed and distributes the game. This is the sort of challenge that pricks the person's mind a bit. I don't think people really get off on thinking they ran down a pedestrian. I think they just like to see how good a marksman they are. Dr. Bride Meeks, a Seattle psychologist who once worked with aggressive inmates of California's San Quentin prison, disagrees. A game like that appeals to morbidity in a person, she said. Preoccupation with violence was common in the prisons I dealt with. They would have loved that game. Someone could argue that people act out on their hostilities by playing games, but it has been proven time and time again that violence often comes from modelling.
Video games were starting to unsettle, unless you were a developer, of course. All that controversy was free publicity, and it shifted units. And the fans of the games, well, they didn't care. But some did. And that fear of pixelated mayhem continued to percolate, and only grew more intense as the pixels got better, the images sharper, the sprites more identifiable as people, and then blood, and horror, and gore, and terrible acting.
You see, Lieutenant, we were trying to help the unfortunate augurs.
Augurs?
Those are those things that were chasing us around the house trying to get our blood.
Oh, Kelly, I think you're overreacting.
Night Trap landed on home video game systems in 1992 and introduced the world to interactive horror, where you watch CCTV cameras to monitor a group of teenagers who are about to become the target of vampires. And that same year, Mortal Kombat made a splash on its release. A one-on-one fighting game, it took the base mechanics of the popular Street Fighter series and made it gory. These two games brought the realism of the medium to new levels, and the levels of scrutiny the industry was under increased proportionally. So much so that in 1993, the year after Mortal Kombat and Night Trap's release, a United States Senate committee held a hearing on the video game industry.
It has been quite a leap from Pac-Man to Night Trap.
Senator Byron Dorgan.
These critics are similar, in my judgment, to those who are standing around still counseling us that there's no evidence cigarettes cause cancer. There's no evidence, they say, that violence on television or violence in video games affects our children. Of course it affects our children. If we lost all common sense, of course it affects our children. And it affects our kids in a very negative way. About 2 months ago, I saw the video game Night Trap for the first time. It is a sick, disgusting video game, in my judgment. It's an effort to trap and kill women. Shame on people that produce that trash. It's child abuse, in my judgment.
Instead of enriching a child's mind, these games teach a child,
Senator Joseph Lieberman,
to enjoy inflicting torture.
Senator Herbert Cole.
Mortal Kombat and Night Trap are not the kind of gifts that responsible parents give. Night Trap, which adds a new dimension of violence specifically targeted against women, is especially repugnant.
Bill White of Sega was also there.
And we believe, just as Congress has treated the motion picture industry, that we as an industry should have an opportunity to regulate ourselves, and believe that we've taken that first step this morning in developing an industry-wide coalition to adopt an industry rating system with enforcement.
The hearings had two main impacts. All that publicity helped sell a shed-load of games. And they led to the formation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, which issues age ratings on games, much like movies have. So 1993 was a big year for video games. But over in Blighty, in that same year, a small game was to be released that was a fair bit simpler. A game without quite the same level of graphics, of graphical violence and mayhem as Mortal Kombat and Night Trap. A game with one hell of a catchy, ironically jaunty theme tune. A little game called Cannon Fodder.
Whoa, never been so much fun. 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 Go up to your brother and kill him with your gun and leave him lying on his uniform, dying in the sun.
Cannon Fodder took about a year and a half to make. Year and a quarter, year and a half. Basically, Cannon Fodder started off as a game like Lemmings. Do you remember Lemmings?
Oh, very well.
Yeah. So initially in our office for about a year it was called Lemmings with Weapons, and that was pretty much the plan for the game, like level-based squad of people that needed to do stuff. So the innovation for Cannon Fodder was all the kind of like running around and shooting thing games up to that time had been just one character, like Rambo. The first thing with us was like innovating the controls for having multiple people in your squad firing at once and how to share bullets out and maneuver them like a snake around obstacles and stuff like that. In order to individualise them, we decided to name all the soldiers. So we started to make up stupid names. So we had all these named soldiers, basically.
That was game developer Jon Hare, creator of Cannon Fodder, talking to me on the phone about the early days of development. John, along with friend Chris Yates, formed Sensible Software in 1986 and had success with many titles before producing the legendary Sensible Soccer in 1992. And then Cannon Fodder. Released in 1993 on the Commodore Amiga, before being ported to other systems, this little game was little in every sense. As in, you control tiny soldiers from above, across a tiny world. The game itself was simple. Left-click somewhere on the screen and your troop moves to that point. Right-click and your troop shoots at that point. It's a little bit more complicated than that because you can split up your troops and so on into different groups. You can have, for example, a group of 4 turns, group of 2, and then you can assign who has the missiles and who has the grenades, or you can do a combination of both. And there are some vehicles along the way as well, which you can get into, but they're really difficult to control, especially the drop. You have to jump over trees, and then when you jump over the trees, the missiles explode instantly. Also, because you get attached to the carriage, just keep on using them, and then if you die, you just reset your But basically, you just need to kill all the enemy troops and blow up their bases. And that's that. So far, so good. Nothing controversial here. After all, war has been the subject of countless novels and films and TV programs and video games since we had any of those things. And the game was very well received by critics and is still lauded by fans as one of the best games ever, so everyone lived happily ever after. Goodbye. Oh, but wait, things just got ugly.
The Daily Star, 26th of October 1993. Poppy game insult to our war dead. Exclusive by Jonathan Guy. War veterans have slammed as monstrous a decision to use a Remembrance Day poppy to illustrate a new computer game called Cannon Fodder. The game, tipped to be the year's biggest seller, will make its debut at a show in London's Olympia from November 11th to 14th, Remembrance Sunday. Manufacturers Sensible Software say, war has never been so much fun. The distinctive poppy symbol is featured on the game and on the front page of leading computer magazine Amiga Power, out on Armistice Day. British Legion chiefs and MPs have branded the use of the poppy as appalling. Royal British Legion spokesman Dennis York said, "This will offend millions at a time when they remember loved ones who gave their lives in war." Liberal Democrat MP Menzies Campbell stormed, "It is monstrous that the poppy should be used in such a way." Viscount Montgomery of Alamein, son of Britain's great Field Marshal, said, "It is very unfortunate that anyone should see fit to detract from the poppy's place as a symbol of remembrance." But a spokesman for Virgin Interactive Entertainment, which is marketing the game, said, "The poppy is there to remind consumers war is no joke."
Oh dear, that came out of nowhere. Things just got sour. Let's back it up.
We decided that when you ranked up, like embellish this by showing the names of the surviving soldiers growing up and showing their rank getting bigger, and, you know, everyone celebrated and everyone was happy because there was a celebration music at the end of the level. And then as an afterthought, we decided one day to like just put all the names of the dead people up as well, like the other guys who died. And we noticed that, God, there's so many dead people. Where do they come from? It's like you'd been focusing on keeping Jules and Jops alive normally and had ignored the 18 dead guys that it took to win that mission. And so because we'd named the guys, we started to realise the metaphor we'd created for real people dying in war at this point. And then we made several changes. Number one, we made it so you could not click away from that list. You're forced to see all the names of the people who've died. Secondly, we put some sad music. It was a love song I'd written when I was 18. I was split up with a girlfriend. And it was a mournful teen dirge. Yeah, actually, I'm still gigging with that song. I just did a gig in Warsaw. And now in Poland, the crowd actually sing along with me playing my song that I wrote when I was 18, which is quite bizarre.
I touched your hand and felt your softness.
Yeah, I think it was the first time you had been forced to focus on people dying. And from our perspective, it had come about by accident. You know, remembering dead people. And we embellished it even more by, we started with this idea with some flowers, and then we ended up deciding on gravestones for all the dead people. We did that, so the graves started to fill up. And then we put the little joke that the rank was, the higher your rank, the better gravestone you got, you know. So the privates got little iron crosses and the big guys got mausoleums. And then you've got the home and away score above that as well. So there's quite a lot of irony in that. So we kind of felt at that point that the game was, by whatever means we got there, properly reflecting, talking about war dead.
So the game started out as a simple shooter, but kind of grew a conscience as the game and its stars developed. Well, that's fine, but somewhere along the line, the poppy got involved, and people, some people anyway, got very pissed off. A quick overview of the poppy to give something of an understanding to its significance. The poppy is a symbol of remembrance to those who fought and died in war. It was inspired by the famous World War I poem In Flanders Field by Lieutenant Colonel John Hare.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Inspired by the poem, Moyne and Michael began wearing a silken poppy and gave other similar poppies to others so that they may all display remembrance to the fallen. Today in the UK and other countries, they are sold on and around Remembrance Day, November the 11th, for no fixed price, simply make a donation in order to raise funds to assist servicing and ex-service men and women and their families. And speaking of controversies, the poppy appeal itself is not without its detractors, with some decrying poppy fascism as public figures are lambasted if seen not wearing one, and some fear that the symbol has been co-opted by governments trying to enlist public support behind ill-advised military campaigns. So, back to the game. Hare and his crew had crafted a great game, but that's only half the job. You need to sell it too. Enter the marketing department.
Is that where the poppy came in? Did it seem like a natural fit to have that imagery there?
So we discussed with Virgin how to market it, and we knew we were coming out around about November. So we decided to pin it to Remembrance Day, and then from that we decided to go with the poppy. That's kind of the way it happened. And so our artist came up with the design with the black background with the poppy, that we all know from Remembrance Day. And we thought, well, this is great because we've got a game which actually reflects real life or it has a reflection on real war dead. And we thought it was nice to respect the real war dead and to stick the poppy on the box. And we were quite pleased that we had a game with some real social commentary in it. Very, very much in the same feeling as that last Blackadder series, actually. Very British. And I can't even remember if that Blackadder series had come out before Cannon Fodder, but it was a similar kind of feeling to it. And so we thought this would be fine. And then I don't know how, actually, this started. The Daily Star, I think, must have initially done the article incensing some kind of outrage.
So, the outrage then. We've already heard the article, and in that same day's edition of the newspaper was this editorial.
Daily Star. The Star says. Editorial, 26th of October 1993. Shameful. The poppy is a sacred reminder of the men and women who gave their lives in 2 world wars. How sickening to see it being abused to sell a savage computer game. The distributors say the poppy is there to remind the customer that war is no joke. That's just publicity writers' hypocrisy. Computer game designers compete to glorify war and viciousness. How dare they use the poppy to turn truth on its head? Make sure you don't buy this shameful game.
And then we got a letter from the Royal British Legion. And the Royal British Legion said to us, doing a computer game with a poppy on it, that's frivolous and an affront to the war dead. And they also told us that the poppy we'd used, that kind of image, the plastic classic poppy that we know, they said it's our copyright and you've got no right to use this. And they asked us to pay them some money for abuse of their copyright. And they charged us £1,000. So we were a 2-man outfit, so we paid £500 each. I've never, ever bought a poppy again to this day, and I used to buy them every year.
£1,000 would buy a lot of poppies anyway. So Jon and his partner paid their cash, and that was that. Maybe not a happy ending, but an ending nonetheless. And so the game went on to become a fan favourite, and that... Nope, there was a bit more trouble to come. See, although these were pre-internet days, at least in the sense of everyone routinely having access to the net, there was still a vibrant community base for video games. And before Facebook and the like, that type of community was represented by magazines. Video game magazines were every bit as important to the industry as the developers themselves. A bad review could break any chance of your game being a success. And reading the latest issue of C&VG or Commodore Format or Your Sinclair and so on was as much a part of the video game world as playing the games themselves. In fact, for many, even more so. The magazines were far more affordable and so more easily in reach of pocket money budgets. And most magazines had a cassette or disc stuck to the front cover containing demos of new releases. Essential stuff for any computer game aficionado. In the Amiga world, arguably the key player on the magazine racks was Amiga Power, and Cannon Fodder had the coveted front cover, the red poppy front and centre. But even before the magazine hit the shelves, word got back to the Daily Star once again, and once again, they weren't happy. Sensing a coming storm, and behind their editor's disgruntled back, Amiga Power's publisher pulled the plug on the cover and switched it to a far less contentious version, which consisted of screenshots of one of the game's levels. Yes, it also included a text, "This is it, Cannon Fodder, the best game of the year," but it wasn't the intended cover. Stuart Campbell, The editor at the time was furious.
I was angrier about that than about any other aspect of the story, and it still makes me fume a bit if I think about it.
The words, but not the actual voice, of Stuart Campbell. Stuart and I shared a couple of emails to discuss what went on, with Stuart's recollections read here by an actor.
It's obviously completely ridiculous, both because it's so intrinsically trivial, and because the controversy so brainlessly misses the point that Cannon Fodder actually treated the dead with more solemnity and respect than any other video game in history up until that time. And sure, it did that in a sort of jokey context, but so did the last episode of Blackadder Goes Forth, right down to the poppy motif, and nobody considers that disgraceful. That's how we felt at the time, and it's how I feel now.
So Stuart felt the newspaper's outrage missed the point, and was angry that the publisher hastily switched a cover without his input. So he vented his spleen a little in that issue's Just Like to Say section, a small space at the bottom of the contents page where the magazine's staff got to say a few words. That month, Stuart had only one thing on his mind.
Old soldiers? I wish them all dead.
Well, that was sure to calm things down then.
The Daily Star. Poppy Row Mag insults old soldiers. Exclusive by Chris McCashin. 23rd of November, 1993. Britain's ex-servicemen are up in arms after a magazine boss declared he would like to see all old soldiers dead. Fury erupted when the Daily Star revealed that, just days before Remembrance Sunday, Amiga Power used a red poppy on the front page to illustrate a computer game called Cannon Fodder. The magazine changed its sick cover after a storm of protest. But acting editor Stuart Campbell said in an editorial, Stuart would just like to say, old soldiers, I wish them all dead. Confronted by the Daily Star at his office in Bath, Spotty Scotsbourne Campbell...
Hang on, Spotty? That's a bit personal, isn't it?
That was just bizarre. There wasn't a single spot on my face, and the pic they ran showed that clearly. So it was just a startling illustration of just how blatant newspaper lying could be. Here they are, literally showing a picture of something and then making a claim that anyone looking at the picture could see wasn't true. We all know on some abstract level that newspapers lie, but something like that is a real eye-opener. They just didn't give a toss that they were printing a picture of a double-decker bus and telling their readers, look at this giraffe, because they assume the readers are just total morons.
Anyway, sorry, back to the article.
Spotty Scotsbourne Campbell, 26, said, it may have been insensitive, but aren't I entitled to an opinion anymore? The revamped December issue of Amiga Power, circulation 54,000 copies a month, also insults the Royal British Legion by labelling them conscientious objectors because of their outspoken anger at the abuse of the red poppy. Enraged Royal British Legion spokesman Dennis York stormed, good God, it leaves you speechless. If it was not for the old soldiers who stood up during the wars, he might not be alive. Amiga Power publishing director Greg Ingham admitted that including Campbell's comment in the magazine was a regrettable mistake. He said, I would like to apologise to the Royal British Legion and anyone else who was offended.
Yeah, that didn't go too well. What were you thinking, Stu?
The words were meant to be an ironic comment on manufactured outrage versus true horror, but I shouldn't have expected anyone to either pick up on something that obscure or decipher what I was saying with it. To be honest, I never thought they'd still be looking at Amiga Power after they got the initial story. The first we knew about it was when someone from the Star turned up at Future Reception. We were so unaware of any controversy that I went down there to see what they wanted, rather than just telling them to piss off.
So the Daily Star got a lot of mileage out of Cannon Fodder, and Jon Hare and Stu Campbell found themselves at the centre of a little controversy they hadn't seen coming. You might argue they should have seen it coming, but, well, they didn't. That must be a bit of a shock. How does that feel? Is there an instant kind of...
Yeah, I was...
Oh, shit.
No, I was really pissed off they hadn't bothered to play our game. Yeah, it was respectful to the war dead. I was angry about that. It's like, you're coming after us without seeing we're the only game to fucking give these dead people respect. And you're attacking us for it. And it actually made me personally feel angry at their ignorance. So that was my first emotion, and by far my overriding emotion, that they hadn't bothered to look at our work, because it was that time when all computer games were seen to be bad, horrible things, if you remember.
Right.
And so made huge assumptions in the way that this was being done. Of course, they asked us to write this message on the start. We said this is in no way endorsed by the British Legion. This message came from them. They made us write that in the game.
As Jon says, the game now contained a message advising it was not associated with the British Legion. But, like Amiga Power, it had also had to change its cover from the disputed poppy image to a camouflage effect piece with a soldier just visible emerging from it. Effective, yes, but as with the magazine cover, not the impactful image the creators had intended.
And of course, what they didn't realise, it was a massive opportunity to actually work with us. You know, they could have spun it around and said, OK, we've seen the game, we understand you're respecting dead people in the war. That's really good. We'd like to work with you and make the British Legion part of what you're doing. They could have easily taken that attitude. But in those days, computer games were seen as terrible things, a bit like playing Black Sabbath records backwards, I guess. And so, unfortunately, we had to change the cover, and the cover we did was okay, but it wasn't as good as the original cover. And Virgin had to modify their marketing campaign accordingly.
And so ended the storm in a teacup that was the release of Cannon Fodder. So the little game that could kill hundreds of soldiers made a big name for itself in a very short time. It went on to be remade for various other systems and spawned 2 sequels. And of course, this is a computer game we're talking about. And at the time, a significant proportion of the market base were kids, who just ploughed on and spent their pocket money on the game anyway. After all, it was being reviewed so well. The game went on to sell over 100,000 copies. Not bad at all, especially at a time when floppy disk piracy was so rampant. In fact, that 100,000 sales probably actually equates to, I don't know, but at least double, if not triple, or even quadruple copies out there.
There's another conversation. You know, in those old days, there was so much piracy, and people maybe aren't aware of just how much. I mean, in the UK alone, it was 10-to-1 piracy.
Flipping out. Is that right? 10-to-1?
Yeah, 10-to-1 piracy. 10 pirates for every 1 copy bought. But that's low. I mean, in some countries, like in Poland, everyone I go to in these retro shows, every single person has obviously played Sensible Shock and Cannon Fodder or whatever. Not a single person bought the game. Not one. They didn't even have a proper market there. Do you know how they got their games in Poland? It's really funny. And the same in Holland, apparently. But in Poland, in the Commodore 64 era, they got their games because on the Polish national radio, like on the equivalent of Radio 2, I guess, for us, in the night time, they would broadcast the tape signals like that.
No way.
So you could pirate it on national radio. Yep.
That's amazing.
It is an amazing story, right? And I told someone this because a Polish guy told me, and a Dutch guy told me it happened in Holland as well. And people probably aren't aware of how much our games were copied. I mean, literally, I reckon 10-to-1 easy in the UK, probably 20-to-1 in other parts of Europe or more. And of course, and then you've got on top of that, the machines dying out. So all that amounts to us not getting money, actually. So you end up with a disproportionate amount of knowledge about your games as opposed to the amount of money you got from it for that reason.
Anyway, regardless of how many swashbucklers there were out there, the game was a hit. And Piracy Schmiracy, a profitable hit too. So, what can we learn from this digital death-dealing, blood-soaked monstrosity of a game? Has Stuart, the Spotty or Not magazine editor, learned anything?
Tragically not. I'm still as big an idiot now as I was then, except that maybe it taught me to genuinely not care what newspapers say. What you have to remember is that only the Star made a fuss, and the Star isn't a newspaper, it's a comic for imbeciles. What I've come to realise in the job I do now is that people involved with the media tend to overestimate the influence the media has, and don't get how little most people actually care what's in the newspapers. For most folk, tabloids are just some nonsense and gossip to pass a commute or a tea break with and then line the cat's litter tray with. If you get monstered in the Daily Star, it feels bad at the time, but you have to realise that pretty much nobody gives a shit. Literally 99% of the population doesn't read it, and even the ones that do probably skip that page because it had no tits on it. Nobody's going to stab you in the street or even stop buying your magazine because of it, and even if they read the story, they'll have forgotten about it by tomorrow. It's a nothing. On the other hand, it does mean that the real issue 32 cover has a semi-mythical status, which is kind of cool. Only 2 proper prints of it ever existed. I've got one of them in a frame on my wall.
I wouldn't say I felt like it was a controversy. As someone who is like a creative person who'd been working on it for a year and a half, it just pissed me off. I've got to say, it really did. And even if you look at nearly all computer games that come out now, hardly any of them have any political commentary in them at all. It would have been nice to do more games like that and to get closer to the grain. You know, some interesting maybe weapons of mass destruction games could have come a little while later. And war itself always has controversy attached to it somewhere or other. And I kind of regret the fact that games has never been able to go down that more cutting-edge social commentary line that it could have done.
So there you have it, folks. I suppose the takeaway for me is that a few people with a loud enough platform can really shape a conversation, or even make a conversation. Or perhaps the moral is to beware what you read, especially on slow news cycles. Or perhaps it's to look ahead and think before you speak. Or to make the art you want and damn the rest. War has never been so much fun. Outrage, Outrage, Outrage featured interviews with Jon Hare and Stuart Campbell. Thank you to both of them for agreeing to be part of this. Thank you again to Jon Hare for the use of some of his fine music. The voice actors were Ruth Tinsley, Ed Feather and Robert Taylor, and it was produced and written by me, Andy Smith. Head on over to sociablesoccer.com to find out more about Jon's new game, Sociable Soccer, which is available via Steam now for the PC, and other versions including mobile, PS4 and Xbox One are all on the way. And while you're at it, why not visit Stuart's blogs as well? Head over to Wings Over Scotland for his political outlet, or Wings Over Sealand for his thoughts on video games, the media, politics, snacks, the apocalypse, and other things.